Hi, from London News, and this is a follow-up from the 60-minute program, which I just put up on my YouTube channel recently about Daniel Andrews and branch stacking here in Victoria. Well, this is a follow-up done by Sky News, and the lady running it was Tony Abbott's secretary, I believe, at one time. Well, she done a wonderful job on Daniel Andrews. She explains why all of a sudden we have now more restrictions and more viruses floating around. And she claimly and rightly states that it's obviously due to Daniel ducking for cover. Well, Daniel, I hope you enjoy watching her program. As people who see this now, I hope you enjoy it too, and you can draw your own conclusions. London signing off again, and thanks again for watching. Bye for now.
Premier Daniel Andrews is trying to say that it's somehow the fault of Melbourne families that corona cases are spiking in his branch stacking state of Victoria. Now, talk about hypocrisy. Nor could the Premier be any more opportunistic, trying to use increases in the virus to divert attention away from the crisis that's engulfed Victorian Labor all last week. Now, it's political tactics 101. Distract attention when you're under fire, start another battle, change the narrative, all of which he's trying to do. There's no way I'm playing the game, and I bet you there's no chance you're falling for it at home either. That's because no one is more responsible for this spike in COVID cases in Victoria than the Premier himself. He's to blame because of his weak response to protests 2 weeks back, and because he and his hapless health minister totally handled the outbreak at Cedar Meats that, surprise, surprise, Cedar Meats turns out to be a Labor Party donor. Later in the show, I'll be talking to a Melbourne restaurateur who geared his business up to handle 50 people from today, but now he's had the limit pushed back to a business suffocating 20. It's just not right that people be told something will be allowed from Monday and then be told they'll have another month to wait due to government weakness and sheer incompetence. And while there's no doubt that this increase in new corona cases from 35 the previous week to 116 over the last week just gone is a worry, it's gutless to blame families for this hike when the Premier himself allowed tens of thousands to flood the streets, knowing it would be a risk, but was shown to be unable and indeed unwilling to stand up to the left-wing activists. Right now, we're told there are 121 active cases of COVID-19 in Victoria, with reportedly only 7 people in hospital and just 2 in intensive care. Yet this has been enough for the Victorian government to extend a state of emergency for another month and to have the Victorian Chief Health Officer consider making the wearing of face masks compulsory in public and to warn against travel between different suburbs in Melbourne, and to apparently put it all at risk the reopening of borders between states. Again, see what I mean about Victorian Labor grasping at this issue to divert attention away from the political mess of last week. And if I'm right, I'm telling you I am, because I can smell Labor media manipulation a mile off, why should every Victorian be made to suffer even more financial loss and even more inconvenience and even more loss of freedom because the Andrews government is good at bullying ordinary people but can't say no to protesters or Labor donor mates? This is a state, let's not forget, that's handed out more $1,000 plus fines to residents and business owners than any other. A state that has tried to fine parents for taking their kids out for a driving lesson, for people sitting in a park or wandering around a golf course. And yet out of the 30,000 or so that attended Melbourne's Black Lives Matter protests, only 3 organisers copped a fine. And clearly, if you support a cause that the left agree with or you're a Labor Party donor, the rules don't apply. But for everyone else, the economic harm will hit Victorians worse than anywhere else, because this is a Premier who is about as arrogant as I've ever seen and mired in a branch stacking scandal that stinks to high heaven. On top of this, of course, is the secret debt deal he's determined to do with the Chinese Communist government, even though he knows, you know, we all know, who's been hacking our government and business networks over the past few months. I tell you, if I wrote a novel with this sort of plot, the publishers would send it back to me and say, look, it's just unbelievable, Peter Credlin, can't publish that. But sadly, this is a daily reality for Victorians. And what's becoming increasingly clear is that Victoria under Daniel Andrews is a rotten borough that's holding back the rest of the country. For the majority of Australians, I suspect everything changed after the rallies a fortnight or so back. If it was more or less okay, they thought, for people to march through Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, it was certainly okay to visit your relatives and give them a hug. Now, we're all still concerned about this virus, absolutely. But we're no longer panicked by it. And many of us, I suspect, are already learning to live with it as carefully as we can. But that doesn't mean giving governments licence to crack down on our ordinary freedoms every time there's a few extra cases. The double standard of the protests changed everything. And so too in Victoria did the branch stacking stink of last week.